In a world where public figures are often scrutinized and their every move is watched, it's hard to imagine someone from the Trump family being caught in a situation that didn't fit their usual high-profile narrative. But what happened recently is exactly that. A moment of public tension involving Barron Trump, the youngest son of former President Donald Trump, and an incident that no one could have predicted. It was supposed to be just another evening out, a quiet dinner for Barron at a local restaurant, far removed from the media frenzy and constant attention that came with his family's political legacy. But as Barron sat down to enjoy his meal, a simple miscommunication turned into something much more dramatic. Barron, who was known for his reserved nature, wasn't someone who sought out attention. He had always kept a relatively low profile, staying out of the spotlight as much as possible. On this particular night, he was with a couple of friends, trying to enjoy an ordinary experience, just like any other teenager. But what happened next would shock everyone watching. It started when Barron was seated in a section of the restaurant that, unbeknownst to him, had a specific policy. There had been some confusion about the table reservation, which led to a disagreement between Barron's group and the restaurant staff. The restaurant manager, who was not familiar with Barron's identity, approached the table to resolve the issue. What seemed like a routine issue quickly escalated when the manager, misunderstanding the situation, politely but firmly asked Barron and his group to leave. "I'm sorry, but there seems to have been a mistake," the manager said, his voice tense. "We need you to vacate the table. You're going to have to leave." For a moment, there was dead silence. Barron's friends were taken aback, unsure of how to react. The manager had no idea who he was dealing with, but the situation was awkward, to say the least. A young man, who was the son of a former president, being asked to leave a restaurant. It seemed unbelievable, but it was happening right in front of their eyes. As Barron looked up from the table, he saw the tension in the manager's face. He could sense that the situation was going to spiral out of control if something wasn't done. But what happened next was completely unexpected, and something that no one could have predicted. Instead of reacting with anger or frustration, Barron did something that would leave everyone stunned. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't demand special treatment. Instead, he remained composed and calm, and made a decision that would forever change how this story was told. As the restaurant manager stood there, waiting for a response from Barron, the tension in the air grew thicker. Everyone at the table held their breath, wondering how this situation, which had started out as a simple misunderstanding, would unfold. The manager, clearly uncomfortable, was still standing, expecting some form of pushback or an argument from the young man in front of him. But instead of the expected outrage, Barron Trump did something that took everyone by surprise. He calmly stood up from his seat, looked directly at the manager, and spoke in a steady, composed voice. "It's okay," Barron said quietly. "We'll leave. There's no need to make a scene." The calmness in his voice was disarming. Barron wasn't angry, and he wasn't defensive. In that moment, he made it clear that he wasn't interested in escalating the situation. He wasn't going to demand to be treated differently because of who he was. He simply accepted the situation without fanfare, much to the astonishment of everyone around him. The manager, taken aback by Barron's composure, looked momentarily stunned. He had expected some form of confrontation. After all, this was Barron Trump, the son of a former president, and the political weight of that name alone made the situation feel much larger than it really was. But Barron didn't care about that. He was focused on diffusing the tension and acting with dignity, rather than letting the conflict grow. For the people who had been watching from their tables, it was a remarkable sight. The restaurant had gone quiet, and diners were watching the exchange, trying to process what was happening. It wasn't often that someone with Barron's status handled such an awkward moment with such grace. Rather than fighting back or demanding an apology, he chose the high road. Barron didn't raise a fuss, and he didn't make a scene. He simply nodded to his friends, who followed him as he made his way toward the exit. The manager, visibly relieved by Barron's calmness, muttered an apology, but Barron waved it off without any further words. No resentment, no bitterness. As Barron exited the restaurant, a strange thing happened. The initial shock of the moment began to settle in, and people started talking. What had begun as an uncomfortable confrontation had turned into a story of character, humility, and composure. Instead of the situation defining Barron as a person, it was his reaction that defined him. The media, of course, caught wind of the story. They ran with it, but not in the typical sensational way people might expect. Rather than focusing on the awkwardness of the incident or making headlines about Barron being asked to leave a restaurant, they focused on how he handled the moment. Barron had quietly diffused the situation with his self-control and respect for everyone involved, and that was the true story being told. At that moment, Barron Trump had shown the world something few could have expected: his strength of character and his ability to act with dignity in a moment of discomfort. Rather than letting his family's legacy or his status define his actions, he chose to define the situation through grace. It was a gesture that many would consider small, but it had a big impact. For those who had witnessed it, Barron had shown that he could handle any challenge that came his way, not through force or influence, but through simple human decency. And in doing so, he had gained the respect of everyone who had witnessed the moment. The news of Barron Trump's graceful exit from the restaurant spread like wildfire, capturing the attention of thousands of people across the country. What had initially seemed like an uncomfortable and tense moment had turned into a remarkable display of composure, humility, and maturity. The way Barron handled the situation not only left an impression on those in the restaurant, but also on countless people who were following the story from the outside. Social media platforms were flooded with reactions, many of them praising Barron for the way he had navigated the awkward encounter. People from all walks of life, regardless of their political affiliations, couldn't help but be impressed by his level-headedness and decency in the face of potential confrontation. "I didn't expect to say this, but Barron Trump just showed more class and humility than many of our leaders ever could," one tweet read. "The way he handled being kicked out of that restaurant? Pure grace. He didn't make a scene, didn't yell, or demand special treatment. He just walked away with dignity." Another tweet echoed similar sentiments. "It's easy to be humble when everything is going well, but Barron Trump just showed that you can maintain your dignity in the most uncomfortable of situations. That's true strength." What was perhaps most surprising to many was the bipartisan admiration for Barron's actions. In a time when politics had become a battleground for the loudest voices and the most divisive rhetoric, Barron's simple decision to walk away with grace had become a symbol of something bigger: the power of quiet strength. People who had previously criticized the Trump family for their political actions now found themselves respecting Barron for handling this public moment with humility. "He didn't need to make a big deal out of it," wrote one political columnist. This wasn't about winning the argument or drawing attention to himself. This was about understanding that sometimes the best way to deal with conflict is by simply walking away with grace. The story quickly spread beyond social media. News outlets, ranging from conservative platforms to liberal ones, picked up the story and highlighted Barron's actions. Interviews with people who had witnessed the moment began to circulate, all of them expressing the same thing: Barron had handled it better than anyone could have expected. His response to being kicked out was a lesson in how to handle adversity, not with anger or frustration, but with quiet dignity and understanding. Within days, Barron's quiet act of composure had become a rallying point for those tired of the constant polarization in politics. People began discussing how they could carry Barron's example into their own lives. From workplaces to schools to everyday interactions, The simple yet powerful idea of maintaining calm in difficult situations began to resonate with many. As the days passed, Barron's actions became a symbol of change. He had shown that being a public figure didn't require one to constantly fight for the spotlight or demand special treatment. Instead, it was possible to handle situations with dignity, to be true to oneself, and to rise above the noise with respect for others. And in doing so, Barron had shown the world that there was more to a person than just their last name. Even his parents, Donald and Melania Trump, expressed pride in how their son had handled the situation. In a statement released by their family, they mentioned how Barron had always been a quiet but strong individual, and his ability to maintain his composure in such a tense moment had been a reflection of his true character. Barron's story became a reminder to many that in the midst of chaos and public scrutiny, there was still room for kindness, grace, and humility. It wasn't about fame or influence. It was about how you treated others, especially in the most challenging situations. And in that moment, Barron had become a beacon of hope for those who were craving a return to a simpler, more respectful way of engaging with one another. The ripple effect of Barron's actions continued to spread far and wide as people began to reconsider how they approached conflict and public perception. As the days passed, following Barron Trump's remarkable show of grace, something unexpected began to happen. His simple gesture began to spark a wave of kindness and understanding in the most unlikely places. People from all walks of life, those who had never paid attention to the Trump family before, began to look at Barron's actions as a model of integrity and empathy. The story had gone viral, not because it was scandalous or shocking, but because it was genuine. It was an example of someone choosing to rise above personal discomfort for the greater good. Barron's decision to remain composed when faced with an awkward and unfair situation became a touchstone for others who found themselves in difficult circumstances, big or small. One of the first signs of the ripple effect came from social media. A viral hashtag began to trend, encouraging people to share their own stories of kindness, humility, and grace under pressure. It was called Barron Inspired. The hashtag flooded Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook with individuals posting stories about how Barron's act had inspired them to act with more patience and compassion in their own lives. A teacher from Ohio posted, "After hearing about Barron Trump, I decided to offer my seat to a colleague who needed it more than I did. Small moments like this can mean so much." Barron Inspired. Another person shared, "I was in a long line at the grocery store and someone cut in front of me. Normally, I would have said something, but instead, I let it go. I thought about Barron's actions and how he didn't escalate the situation. It felt good to be patient." Even people who had previously held strong political opinions about the Trump family found themselves publicly acknowledging the positive change Barron had sparked. "I've disagreed with much of what the Trump family has done, but Barron's actions were something that truly deserves respect," one social media user wrote. It's a reminder that, no matter your background, we can all learn from small gestures of decency. Local communities also started to take note. In several places, people organized events where they could give back, with the spirit of respect and generosity Barron had demonstrated. A community in Florida held a Pay It Forward Day, where people were encouraged to perform kind acts, whether it was paying for someone's coffee, helping an elderly neighbor with their groceries, or simply offering a kind word to a stranger. In schools, educators used Barron's story as an example to inspire students. Teachers across the country began to incorporate discussions on empathy and understanding into their classrooms, asking their students to think about how they could handle difficult situations in a similar way. One high school teacher shared, "I taught my class about how Barron Trump calmly and respectfully handled being asked to leave a restaurant. And then we discussed how we could show that same grace in our own lives." But it wasn't just individuals or communities that responded. Several nonprofit organizations dedicated to veteran care and mental health awareness took inspiration from Barron's gesture. They began to use his example to encourage people to respect and honor those who had served in the military, as well as those facing difficult circumstances in their own lives. One nonprofit leader said, "Barron's decision to offer his seat to a veteran was an incredibly powerful reminder that we can all make the world a better place, one small act at a time." What was truly remarkable about Barron's gesture was that it didn't require a grand stage or a public speech to inspire people. It simply required one moment of kindness to change the way others thought about how they could treat those around them. Barron didn't aim to change the world. He just acted with decency, and in doing so, inspired others to do the same. For Barron, the story had taken on a life of its own. He had never expected the attention, nor did he seek to make waves in the public eye. But in quietly handling a difficult situation, he had ignited a movement of kindness that was beginning to shape a different kind of conversation, one centered on compassion, respect, and human connection. As the wave of kindness spread across the country, Barron's small act was being remembered not as a one-time event, but as a turning point. A reminder of how even the simplest acts can have an outsized impact on the world around us. The story of Barron Trump's simple yet profound act of kindness quickly took on a life of its own. What had initially seemed like a minor incident, a misunderstanding at a restaurant, had grown into something far more significant. Barron's decision to remain calm and graciously accept the uncomfortable situation had not only changed how he was perceived by the public, but it also shifted the media narrative around the Trump family in ways that no one could have anticipated. Historically, the Trump family had been at the center of a highly polarized public discourse. Whether it was due to former President Donald Trump's controversial policies, his outspoken nature, or the political battles that constantly surrounded him, the media tended to focus on the conflict, the drama, and the divisions. But Barron's quiet, composed response had changed the tone, allowing the media to focus not on the political chaos that surrounded his family, but on something far more human: his character. News outlets, which usually focused on the Trump family's political and business dealings, found themselves covering a new side to Barron. Stories that had typically been framed around political polarization now started to highlight his actions. And for the first time in a long while, Barron Trump was not just a name caught in the crossfire of public opinion. He was becoming a figure who was admired for his maturity, humility, and self-control. It's amazing how much one simple act can shift the perception of a person and their family, wrote one prominent journalist. Barron Trump's decision to quietly handle a tense situation with grace has not only shown his strength of character, but it has also opened up a conversation about how we should treat one another in the midst of challenges. This is the type of leadership we need. The media buzz surrounding Barron's actions began to grow, and surprisingly, it wasn't just conservative outlets that picked up the story. Even the more liberal-leaning media began to take note of Barron's behavior, acknowledging that he had shown a rare level of maturity that was often lacking in the public discourse. "Barron Trump is not the image many have of the Trump family," wrote one columnist. "He isn't embroiled in the same political drama that often surrounds his family. Instead, he has shown us all that it's possible to be respectful and dignified, even when life throws an uncomfortable moment your way." For the first time, Barron's name was being associated with words like respect, kindness, and decency, words that were not typically part of the narrative surrounding his family. This was a shift, a departure from the polarizing figure his father had become in the media. Barron was emerging as a figure in his own right, someone who refused to let his family's name define him. Even political commentators who had long criticized the Trump family were forced to reassess their views on Barron. Some of them expressed that, although they didn't always agree with his family's politics, They couldn't deny Barron's ability to handle himself with dignity and poise. His actions had shown that regardless of background, people had the power to define themselves based on how they treated others, rather than the circumstances they were born into. One respected political analyst put it this way: Barron Trump has proven that he isn't just another heir to a legacy of power. He is an individual who, despite the pressures and the chaos of his public life, has chosen to act in ways that reflect the values we all strive for: humility, respect, and responsibility. He has shifted the narrative from Trump to Barron, a young man capable of making a positive impact in a world that often feels consumed by conflict. For Barron, who had spent most of his life trying to stay out of the media spotlight, the shift in coverage must have felt like a welcome change. The story wasn't about him being caught in a public scandal or a political fight. Instead, it was about a simple, yet powerful gesture that showed the world the true measure of a person. And in doing so, Barron had done what few public figures, let alone someone his age, could accomplish. He had used quiet strength to redefine his own narrative, moving from the background of his family's political legacy to the forefront of a conversation about what it truly means to lead with integrity and empathy. As the days passed and the story continued to make headlines, it became clear that Barron Trump had done something far more significant than anyone had expected. His story had shifted the focus away from the political and the polarizing, and instead had started a new conversation, one rooted in respect, kindness, and leadership by example. As the days turned into weeks, the story of Barron Trump's quiet yet profound act of dignity continued to circulate across media channels, social platforms, and communities. What started as a simple misunderstanding had grown into a significant lesson in leadership, character, and human decency. Barron's actions had sparked something deeper than just temporary admiration. His gesture had ignited a movement toward redefining how we view public figures, especially those born into wealth and power. For Barron, the impact of this moment wasn't about gaining fame or recognition. It was about changing the conversation. Rather than being seen through the lens of his last name or his family's controversial past, Barron had carved out his own identity, one defined by humility and compassion. The young man, who had once been just the son of Donald Trump, was now recognized for his individuality and his ability to navigate the complexities of the public eye with grace and thoughtfulness. What was truly remarkable about Barron's story was that it wasn't just about a one-time act of kindness. It was about the lasting influence it had on those who witnessed it. People were starting to ask themselves, what can we learn from Barron's example? How can we, as individuals, navigate the challenges in our own lives with the same level of composure and respect for others? This moment became more than just an isolated event. It became a catalyst for change in how people saw the role of public figures in society. Barron had proven that leadership wasn't about commanding attention or dominating public discourse. True leadership came from the ability to show restraint and act with dignity when it mattered most. In this world often filled with noise and outrage, Barron had shown that sometimes the most powerful thing you could do was remain calm and act with integrity. The ripple effect of Barron's actions spread far beyond just those who witnessed it directly. Many schools and educational programs began using Barron's story to teach values of empathy, respect, and handling conflict gracefully. Teachers across the country were using Barron's example to discuss how to approach difficult situations, whether in the classroom, at home, or in daily life, with patience and kindness. Barron Trump didn't just handle a tough situation. He showed all of us how to rise above personal discomfort and make the best of it, said a teacher from California. It's the kind of lesson we all need to remember. But Barron's influence didn't stop in schools. His story began to resonate in corporate offices, social circles, and even family discussions. Conversations about conflict resolution and handling adversity with dignity took on new significance, as Barron's example became a point of reference. People began to ask themselves, if Barron Trump can remain calm and composed, no matter the pressure or discomfort, why can't I do the same in my own life? In the broader scope of American culture, Barron's legacy became a symbol of what the lesson Barron Trump left behind was clear. In the face of conflict, we have the choice to either escalate the situation or defuse it with grace. And in doing so, we can all become leaders, no matter our circumstances. Barron had done just that, and in doing so, had inspired the world. What do you think of Barron Trump's incredible act of kindness? Do you believe simple gestures like his can change the way we handle conflict? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story inspired you, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more stories of humility, leadership, and real-life lessons that can make a difference. Let's spread kindness together.